Okay, right. So, these next series of videos are critical. I'm going to kind of explain them, but you need to kind of, I guess the word is trust me and kind of work with me and just sort of, there are a range of ways of seeing the answers to this, but you just have to just go with me and look at the different ways I sort of show you how to get there. Right, so the first thing here is this, that we're talking about fixed costs. Now, here's the thing. I mean, fixed costs are fixed. When I say fixed costs are fixed costs do not, again, fixed costs do not vary with volume. They just don't. Right? I mean, they don't. So, the problem we have is that when we decided that we could start doing this whole we could absorb fixed costs over production units, and we could calculate this thing called FOIR. We created the impression or the idea that fixed costs could vary with volume. Right? And this is just an introduction before we actually start talking about this. So this is a problem of dealing with, of breaking down or analyzing or of analyzing or doing or carrying out what we call absorption costing. Because you see, the whole point of absorption costing is we want to make sure we absorb all our costs, well, all our fixed overheads in the production house into our product so that we can as best accurately price the product. So in the process of trying to do this, when we try and analyze, we start having issues because people come up with all sorts of strange variances. But the truth is that fixed costs just do not vary with output. So for example, let's focus on rent. If you rented a space, right, and the rent if the budgeted rent based on last year, because we're talking about fixed costs, as they do not vary with output, very simply, if the budgeted rent last year was supposed to be £50,000, and you thought you were going to pay £50,000 again this year for a fixed cost, and you ended up paying £60,000, so this is what the budgeted was, and this is what the actual was. Well, quite simply, the difference between the two is the variance. Well, when I say the variance, is what we call the expenditure variance. Right? So first of all, I've given you the answer to one of the variances that's just there. It's there for the taking. I mean, I'm going to analyze it slightly differently in a second in the next set of videos. But on any given Sunday, if you're ever asked to calculate the expenditure variance, well, it's just what it is. These are fixed costs. We should not be doing this whole volume thing. I mean, when I say we should not, we can come to ask the question of how were we able to use? How were we able to use a certain space? We were expecting to use a certain space to generate a certain number of units, but we used that space to generate even more units. And we can analyze that. We can do that. So the question is, wow, how were we able to do that? Or why were we not able to generate as many units as we thought? We thought, oh, we would use this space, and in this space we'd be able to get people to move around, and we would generate 1,000 units. And for some strange reason, we only generated 500 units. Were they too crowded? What was going on? And that's referred to as a capacity variance, which is a breakdown of a volume variance, because if you like, that is based on volume somewhat. So, but in of itself, the very first variance I want you to etch, so to speak, in your minds is this question of an expenditure variance. Expenditure variance is just, what did you budget? What was it based on last year? And what was it this year? And then everything I'm going to do on from the next video breaks this whole thing, almost breaks this rule, and pretends that fixed overheads are volume-based variances. I mean, I can still eke out what I need, but it starts treating fixed overheads like it does material and labor. So there's no need to kind of panic or react. We're just trying to break down variances and trying to find what's causing them. But the first variance I want you to be most comfortable with is this idea of the expenditure variance, which is just pretty much what the budgeted is from the actual. I mean, if you look at, please, if you turn to page 47 of your textbook, look at question 92. I haven't even looked at the question. I can see the question says, what is the fixed overhead expenditure variance? That's the second. There's a volume and expenditure. We're going to tackle the other variances, of course, but when you're trying to answer the fixed overhead expenditure variance, well, just look at what it says. Budgeted overheads, 20,000. You thought it was going to be 20,000. Think of that as rent. Actual overheads, 25,000. What's the difference? 5,000. You paid 5,000 more. 5,000 unfavorable, right? Right there. That's it. Unfavorable, you paid more. That's the expenditure variance, right? Now, what I do next, again, I emphasize from all of the other videos, is to turn this thing into this kind of volume-based sort of thing and kind of discuss what's going on, because you remember that we flex budgets, and I'll talk about that in the next video, because we don't actually treat things as fixed costs. We calculate this fixed overhead absorption rate based on last year and do things with it in this year and then adjust. And because of that, we have this whole, we're able to do a bit more analysis. But otherwise, simply and fundamentally, the budgeted overhead versus the actual overhead is your expenditure variance. Okay, great. So that's the first variance that I want you to capture, and understand that if it goes up, you're paying more. That's a higher expense for that product, and for that's a higher overhead that you've accumulated in that period. Okay, great stuff. So that's the first video. See you in the next one.